Joining me now is the author of international bestsellers, The Madness of Crowds, The Strange Death of Europe, and his latest work, The War on the West. Douglas Murray, let's start with your hometown, NYC, and its failure to cope with the influx of illegal immigrants who are now being forced to sleep in the street outside the Roosevelt Hotel, which has been turned into an asylum seeker arrival centre. According to the city, up to 500 people are arriving every day, and the locals are not happy, including some Democrat politicians who held a rally outside of City Hall, and they were blasting Joe Biden for being asleep at the wheel on the migrant crisis.
It's interesting, isn't it, Rita? If these Democrats had looked at themselves, say, a year ago and just sort of surveyed what was being said, I think they would have condemned themselves as, racist, xenophobic, MAGA-like Republicans. What other insults would they throw out? I mean, isn't it interesting what happens when reality... Nazis, absolutely. They'd have said that they're Nazis for believing in borders. Isn't it interesting what happens when reality catches up with you? Isn't it a shame that it has to catch up with people and they can't see it in advance? I mean, the numbers coming into New York are really, not that big compared to the numbers that have been coming into Texas, Arizona for years. But suddenly the New York Democrats, who were all happy about making New York a sanctuary city, suddenly 500 a day and the city can't cope. Well, here's some interesting stats. It's estimated that the illegal migration into New York State alone is going to cost New York State $10 billion this year, $10 billion. Now, it's also expected, we got the budget figures a couple of weeks ago, that the shortfall, the deficit in New York in administration will be $10 billion in the year 2025.
Oh.
Can nobody do the math? Can nobody do the math and realize there is a price to pay for this? There's a price to pay in housing if you don't enforce your borders. There's a price to pay in the healthcare and in much more. And I just, have endless contempt for those politicians and others who, when they thought it was all going to be cost-free to them, were urging this along, urging on the erasing of the border. And now when it's come to them, are just filled with inept fury.
Absolutely, because New York is a sanctuary city. Those Democrat politicians and the locals who voted for them voted for those policies. I can tell you there ain't too many cities in Texas that are sanctuary cities, and they're having an influx that is far more than 500 a day. Now, moving on, you wrote a fantastic piece in the New York Post about the trial of former Hollywood A-lister Kevin Spacey and the importance of due process. You argue we cannot hold together as a society if we allow anyone with an accusation to be believed. But Douglas, isn't that just what the Me Too movement demands?
Yes, that's what it demanded, Rita. I think that this was actually the vindication of Kevin Spacey in the British courts last week was a very important moment. The Metropolitan Police brought the weakest imaginable set of charges, with 4 men making allegations that should never have been brought to court and didn't stand up in court. And so Kevin Spacey was exonerated. And this follows last year his exoneration in the trial that was brought against him in the US. Now, I don't know how many people who indulged in the whole Me Too stampede in 2017 are even aware that Kevin Spacey was found not to be guilty in the American courts last year and found not to be guilty in the British courts last week. And I think there is a very big lesson that we should be taking from this. And anyone, so many people that were sort of grandstanding in 2017 will just try to pretend that they weren't doing this. But remember all those people who did believe all women and believe all victims, and the person who claims to be a victim must always be believed. Well, no. it turns out that they shouldn't always be believed because sometimes they tell untruths. Anthony Rapp, who brought the civil case against Kevin Spacey in the US, was telling untruths in court, and that was proved in court. These four men in the UK were telling untruths in court, and and so the case was found against. It was found that Kevin Spacey was not guilty. So I think we really need to ask ourselves, why did we in 2017 change the whole presumption of innocence thing? Our society's held together in the Western democracy through the rule of law and the crucial issue of being innocent until proven guilty. And in 2017, some people tried to change that. And it was guilty until you're proven innocent. And even then we'll say that you're guilty and there's no smoke without fire and so on. I think that the people who applied those standards should really think about whether those are the standards they want to live under, because they trashed people's careers. They destroyed people's livelihoods. In some cases, they destroyed people's lives. It's ridiculous to say, believe all people who are accused of anything. And it's ridiculous to say, believe all accusers, except that we have the rule of law and trust it. And I think that without that, yes, we'll totally fall apart. And the people urging it on, just wait till it happens to somebody you know or to you.
That's the standard. Imagine it happening to your son, to your husband, to your brother, and perhaps your perspective will shift a little bit. Now, there's a story emerging from Portland, the looniest left cities known to modern man. And it's been reported that a woman suffering cancer who questioned the need for a trans flag at the clinic where she was receiving treatment has been first bullied by those meant to be treating her and asked to submit to re-education. And when she refused, she was told she can no longer receive cancer treatment at Oregon Health and Science University. I mean, you can just feel the love and tolerance there, Douglas.
I mean, you say it's loony, Rita, and you're quite right. But I mean, it doesn't really encapsulate the sheer madness of what has gone on in that city. And this isn't just an example of it. I mean, you wonder where the adults all went in a city like Portland. That was quite a proud city, quite a successful city in the past. You wonder where the adults all went. What happened to the men who would have stood up and said, "How dare you treat this woman with cancer like that? How dare you?" What happened to the men and women who would have chased such an audacious brat as whoever it was who complained about this woman? Just chase them out of town. What happened to those people in a society like Portland? I mean, you can see, it's always all connected. At the moment, the journalist Andy Ngo, who is in a court in Portland, and there's a case being brought against some of the Antifa activists who hospitalized him with a brain hemorrhage some time ago. When I ask what happened to the adults, it's not at all a rhetorical point. The police in Portland didn't bother to chase down the people who hospitalized the journalist. It was left to the journalist to try to bring a case himself. People really need to focus on how these places have fallen apart, but also to say, have you no self-esteem, you people? How could you get your priorities so out of order that a woman with cancer is treated like this, all for this ridiculous, stupid, ugly flag about a total fad that I'm fed up with and everyone else should be? I mean, where are your priorities?
Well, their moral compass appears to be completely warped, and it's the case with Andy Ngo. There was so much footage of the assault against him. You would have think it would have been the easiest thing to identify some of those culprits, and yet the police seem to be uninterested in the task. Now, it's been a while since we've talked Harry and Meghan, and they cannot stay out of the headlines. There's a rift apparently between them and Posh and Bex, with the Beckhams reportedly irate after Harry accused them of leaking to the media. Now, Douglas, it's been suggested that the Duchess of Sussex has manipulated Prince Harry into thinking David and Victoria Beckham were behind these leaks to the media. I mean, that doesn't sound like our Megs at all, does it?
No, I mean, Harry and Meghan must be shocked at the idea of anyone speaking to the media. And I'm sure we'll hear all about it when Prince Harry has another book to sell or when they get another Netflix thing out, which they may never do. Yeah, I mean, imagine this couple complaining about leaks. It's not surprising, but I would suggest that there might be something behind this which people haven't considered. Everyone is reporting this as Harry and Meghan being friends with the Beckhams and so on, and them being leaked against. Anyone knows from the stories of their wedding some years ago, the Sussexes' wedding, most of the celebrities in the congregation didn't seem to know the happy couple. And there are many stories of people turning people next to them in St. George's, Windsor, and saying, "How do you know Harry and Meghan?" And say, "We don't. They were invited because they were famous people." And so it's perfectly possible there has been no fallout at all because the Beckhams aren't actually friends with the Sussexes. They're just people that the Sussexes invite to their weddings.
Well, yes, George and Amal Clooney, for example, I think they were asked, how do you know the happy couple? And their response was, well, we don't. But, you know, it's a royal wedding. Why not come? It always struck me, and I was one of the first, I want to take credit for this, I was one of the very first to have my doubts about Meghan. And those doubts were absolutely confirmed during their wedding when she had no friends or family there. No family other than her mother. No cousins, aunties, uncles. We know she's got some issues with her sister and her father. That, to me, red flags everywhere, Douglas.
You know, there was a phrase we used to be able to use for that, Rita. We used to call it women's intuition. It's probably an absolute dinosaur of a phrase, and I shall probably be cancelled for even suggesting that any such thing exists, and so I shall say no more.
Absolutely, because, you know, what even is a woman? I mean, that is just a rabbit hole you don't want to go down.
What is intuition in these circumstances? I mean, who's to say, Rita? I meant non-binary person, in non-disclosing, assigned at birth female intuition. Help me.
Thank you. Thank you. Obviously, your re-education is working beautifully. Douglas Murray, thanks for your time tonight.
Thank you.